My name is Brandon and welcome to the live audio master class. Today we're going to be doing something called solving your streaming audio, and honestly this is going to be something that I think really impacts a lot of streamers. Not only is audio one of the largest things that you need to be focused on when it comes to your stream, but it's usually what makes or breaks a really good stream. And I know that that sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain. When it comes to video or anything broadcast, you can watch pretty pictures, sure, but audio is what's going to sink you into it. I want you to imagine things like movies without sound effects. Imagine like a Marvel movie without sound effects and it's just a whole bunch of grunting and stuff. It's completely different, right? So audio is what really shifts the focus, making sure that your audio is lined up, your microphone sounds great, your background music, your game music, your any kind of other VFX really makes sense, not only where it lines up, but also what filters and chains you run. I think it really is important. Also, side note, school is closed today, so my son is home with me. He's actually over watching cartoons on the couch. I'm not really sure what he's watching, but he's watching something. So he will probably pop his head over and have a couple conversations with us.
Data brokers will sell your information to spammers, scammers, or anyone who may want to target you. Your full name, email, health records, your address, everything is out there. That's why I've been using Aura, today's sponsor. Aura shows me exactly who's using my information and automatically submits opt-out requests so that this information can get out of their hands. Cleaning up this information not only prevents spam, but also protects me from hackers being able to use this information to gain access to social media accounts, bank accounts, and so much more. It's really easy to set up, and I don't have to download several different apps to be able to do things like VPN, antivirus, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and so much more. I get everything at one affordable price. I value my privacy and I value yours, so go to aura.com/darkencyrus to start your 14-day free trial now. Once again, thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it.
Today we're not only going to be talking about audio chains and filters, we're going to be talking about microphones and the differences between this is a condenser microphone and this is a dynamic, and which one you should probably be leaning for, or if you're using a headset mic. Everything we're talking about today applies basically to anyone. What we are currently doing is we are using this is actually Prism Live Studio. We're not going to be using this as the end all be all, but today we're going to be using this as what we're going to go for our streaming setup and to talk about filters, because it's the same thing as OBS. What you do need to know is that this is basically OBS, but it includes multi-streaming and a lot of other really cool things. Let's kind of get into it and show you just some basic things. Let's talk about microphones first. What you're listening to right now is I have an effect chain on, everything is on, etc. This is the Shure SM7B and it's currently rocking, and I don't think I'll be able to pull it up far enough for you to see in camera. I'm on the Wave XLR, okay? None of that really matters so much as far as the sound quality, as much as the mic that you have and the effects chain that you have. A lot of interfaces are going to be able to provide exactly what you need. The Shure SM7B, the reason I chose it for this stream is because it is probably the most gain hungry microphone I have, and right now I'm actually at 59 decibels of gain to be able to do this, but I'm also 2 inches away from this capsule, right? If I were to back up a little bit, I'd have to increase the gain to be able to get a bunch of sound out of it. Now I do have a compressor and some other things on it to be able to make the sound clear, and hopefully it's clear on your end. Please comment down below if you think that it's clear on your end. But there are plenty of interfaces that you can get. Like this is the Rode Streamer X. This is a great interface. It's expensive. This is a $399 interface, but it also includes a capture card on the back. But then I have like the cheap $50 Fifine A SD3, which is also a really nice microphone interface and pairs well with some budget microphones. When it comes to the microphone itself, there are 2 completely different types. There's a lot of different types. We're only going to talk about 2. You have the dynamic microphone, which is what you currently are looking at, and which is what this is. This is the Fifine K669D. This is a $37 XLR microphone, okay? $37 XLR microphone. This is the Fifine K669C. the sister or the brother, however you want to frame that, of the 669s. This is the condenser version. This is the dynamic version, both $37, both XLR only. These are the cheapest microphones that I own that I actually love the quality. The 669D I had in my setup for a long time. And the 669C, I'm just not a fan of condensers personally, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. The 669C is just it's a condenser microphone. I was really impressed with the sound that came from this. But when it comes to microphones, there's those two types, and let's talk about them. A condenser microphone, which you can barely see through the shadow, hopefully you can see my hand behind. There is a round diaphragm that's inside, and this diaphragm is what's called an active diaphragm. It requires phantom power or 48 volts to activate that diaphragm. So you would use something on your mixer, like most mixers have, even that Scarlett 2i2 has phantom power. It says plus 48 volts. And for condenser microphones, that's how you power them. It actually activates the diaphragm and basically keeps the diaphragm as kind of what detects the sound and feels it. It keeps it open. So think of it like a noise gate, if you understand the term. But in this case, just think of it like a normal gate. It keeps the gate open and lets all sound in. Being an active microphone, it also uses a lot less gain. For example, on this microphone, it was using about 29 decibels of gain. So a really cheap interface like the SC3, which is $50, that also has phantom power, but only caps out at like 55 decibels, can power this with no issue because it's only using half of the available gain. So this is a really good option when it comes to that. When it comes to dynamic microphones, it's a completely different situation. This is kind of a passive diaphragm. And there's a lot of ways that people are going to say this, and I'm sure, depending on who watches this, audiophile or not, is going to comment, Brandon, you're so wrong. But the truth is, there's 1,000 ways to explain something. I'm trying to make it easy for you guys to understand. This is what's called a passive diaphragm that's inside. And what that means is the diaphragm actually does not respond or open up until you meet a certain threshold. And why that's so important is this microphone is really good for sound rejection. Not this one, but dynamic microphones are really good for sound rejection because of that. And also because of that, it requires a lot of extra gain to be able to power that diaphragm because you're not sending a bunch of extra 48 volt or anything into the microphone. So when it comes to you actually building out your stream, making this choice really matters. And what you would instantly think is, I'm a streamer, I have like a mechanical keyboard with blue switches, I want the most sound rejection possible. Obviously give me a dynamic microphone. I want that Shure SM7B. It's the best microphone. And in some cases, I would highly disagree with you. I think that everyone's voice lends itself to a different mic. And what you can see right here, for all of my AV cam video, that's my Sony FX30, and that microphone that's hanging up right there is a Samson C20. This is a condenser microphone that's hung up just above my head, and it has a specific purpose to pick up the sound directly in front of it. And I love that microphone on my voice. I think every mic has its purpose, and when it comes to condenser microphones, these are really good at picking up the natural tones of your voice. For example, if you're a softer speaker, or if you like the sound of your room, if you have a little bit more sound treatment in your room, a condenser microphone probably will lend itself better to your situation. If you don't care about the clicky switches coming in your stream as much, this isn't that big of a deal. Or if you use, non-mechanical switches, the little rubber switches, not that big of a deal. Condenser microphones are going to be your most true to tone sound that you can get when it comes from a microphone. So when it comes to microphones, these things that really make a difference for your stream, condenser microphone is your most true to sound that you can personally have. The dynamic microphone is what's going to be your most tailored sound. You can get a lot more control with that sound up close. You're able to get right up on the microphone, and the proximity effect is what people like in broadcast. And because of that, you can lower the gain, get a lot closer, and there is sound rejection around the room. And some people might say, well, the condenser microphone can do the same with sound rejection, just get closer to the mic. That's so true. It just does it differently, okay? So in short, and to make this simple, if you're wanting a microphone that is, you need to keep close, you might have some sounds in your room that you want to keep out. For example, Hudson's over here is currently talking to the TV. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but if you can, like, I can get really close, turn down my gain, and I can kind of cut some of that stuff out, maybe add a noise gate in. Condenser microphones are going to be your most true to sound, get a lot more sibilance. That's the stuff above 1K hertz or so. The most sibilance, this is going to be kind of what you lend yourself for. If you don't know which one to pick, and you have a little bit of cash to go, pick up a couple of cheap microphones to be able to look at. Fifine has some really awesome cheaper microphones. They have the K683A, which is about the same price as the Fifine AM8. Both of them are actually over here on my setup. The AM8 is right here in a box because I'm doing another review, but this one's white. So what you need to know is that there are so many things there. You might, also I'm not sponsored by Fifine. Fifine just sends me a bunch of products. Let me just go ahead and say that. I'm not trying to sell you Fifine products. They just send them to me. Anyway, but when it comes to budget options, that's really awesome. Now, at no point did I say you need a $400 Shure SM7B. Let's move forward and I'm going to start showing you some effects chain stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. We're using Prism Live as our streaming platform just because I want to be able to walk you through this. But there should be no difference between this and like OBS, same thing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about effects chain. Now in OBS and in any of them, you have an audio mixer. Streamlabs is exactly the same way, right? You're gonna see everything in multiple because I want you to be able to understand this, okay? If you don't know anything about the Wave software, here's the Wave software. On this microphone right now, if I click this, you'll see I have, just for this piece, I have a compressor and an EQ. If I turn those off, I'm currently rocking raw sound to you guys. This is the SM7B raw. It might be too loud or too quiet. I'm not really sure. It looks like it's actually peaking. So I'm actually going to turn my microphone gain down just a little bit. All right, so this is the raw SM7B right now. Wave software, the Rode software. A lot of these already include ways to adjust your EQ and stuff. Sorry, I just hit this. Really, really interesting opportunities. We'll take a look at this in a second. So let's take a look at EQ and some stuff. We're gonna click into filters and we're gonna take a look here. Right now I have a limiter on. I'm gonna hide it. And actually I'm gonna delete it. We'll talk about it in a second. We're in audio filters and this is what you would see in OBS. And some of you might be asking the question, what if I wanna make this change in other platforms instead of just OBS? Like maybe in Discord or in Zoom calls or Google Meets or something. You'd have to use another program, either like Wave. Sonar from SteelSeries is free, by the way. You can run everything through SteelSeries Sonar. Voice Meter will allow you to change your EQ. There's a bunch of these programs that'll do that. We're not going to cover those. We're just talking about streaming today. So what we're going to do is talk about audio filters. And when we hit plus, you're going to see a lot of options. And depending on what version of OBS you're on, if you're on the latest version of 30 or so, you might have a couple of extra ones in here. And also depending on any plugins that you might have had installed on OBS, you might also have some extra ones, okay? So what we're gonna take a look at here is all of the options here. We have an equalizer, a compressor, expander, gain, polarity, limiter, noise gate, suppressor, noise suppression, sound touch filter. This one might not be available in all of them. The upward compressor, and then VST plugins. And this is the one where we're going to camp a little bit so I can show you some stuff. We're going to talk about what each of these do really quick so you can understand what they do. An equalizer is what allows you to boost your bass, lower your treble. Best way to explain it is when you were a kid, or maybe even now, if you were someone who messed around in your car stereo system and like messed with your treble, mids, and bass to be able to kind of like, you know, make everything sound good. I know when I was like 12, 13, 14, putting in stereos in people's cars, making some extra money doing that, the best thing was to always bump the bass a couple, lower the mids a couple, bump the treble a couple. And that just made music pop, right? It was just really nice to do that. The equalizer is what does that. You can do that on any channel, not just your microphone. And some people do that specifically for games like Call of Duty, Escape from Tarkov. They actually do the opposite. They lower the bass and the treble and they boost the mids so they can hear footsteps. And some of those headsets that say footstep booster, that's all they're doing is applying an EQ to your sound set. So you have an EQ. Compressor, very simple. This is what takes your sound. Okay, let's say that this is the range of your sound based upon your settings. Let's say this is you screaming, and let's say that this down here is you being soft and whispery. Because if I whisper in the microphone, it gets really soft. But if I get really loud, I peak, right? This is what takes that sound signal and smushes it together so that it's usable for broadcast, so that you stay in this range of audio, like decibel range. And then as you get really loud, it will pull that signal down. As you get really soft, it'll boost that signal up. And that's how we're able to make it to where you always hear the vocalist. That's how when you listen to people who are on audio tracks or music tracks, you can always hear the artist, even though they might be screaming into the microphone because it's metal, or they might be doing like whispery stuff because they're Billie Eilish. those are things that you can do. They have compressors that bring their audio into area, right? Those are the big two that you're going to talk about. The other ones here are kind of a little bit further ahead, and we're not going to talk too far about them. Just know that the expander does the opposite. It spreads out the audio. Gain is obvious. That should be basically another word for volume. It's not really, but you should think of it that way. Inverting polarity is not something you're going to have to really worry about. What it does, in short, is it takes your sound and it actually flips the waves, because audio is in waves like this, okay? It flips the polarity upside down 180. And you're really only going to ever see this when you're actually playing instruments most of the time. And when the wavelengths clash against each other, they actually cancel out. And so if you have microphones that are identical and EQ and stuff, they're identical facing each other, like speakers facing each other, and they have the exact same sound profile pointing at each other, you actually will barely hear anything. And you'll crank the volume and you still won't hear anything, because the sound waves cancel each other out. So what you do is, from a sound perspective, it's called phasing. We would phase one of the tracks and flip the sound wave, and then you'll actually be able to hear them. You're not really going to see that too much in broadcast for streaming. So just know that invert polarity is not something you should really pay attention to. Limiter is always something I do, just because you don't want to peak, and this prevents you from peaking. Noise gate is what actually, it's that gate point. If like you don't want a specific amount of sound, like let's say you have an air conditioner in your room, or a low rumble or something like that might be in your room, or maybe you have some people moving around, it's a really good way to say, at this volume, kill my feed, okay? So I don't want to hear anything below this volume. Pretty common. It's really a useful thing. Noise suppression should be self-explanatory. It suppresses any kind of noise. There's 2 options, 3 depending on if you have a specific graphics card. And then upward compressor is only what tiers, usually stuff for voice. However, I just don't like it. VST plugins are extra things that you can do. For example, I have all of the Reaper plugins, and we'll talk about those in just a moment too. So we're going to do this. If you didn't download anything, how would you EQ your voice? Now, I'm actually going to pause the music. By the way, shout out to Harris Heller over at Stream Beats for offering DMCA free music. I'm going to pause this. What we're going to do is we're actually going to add some plugins, and let me show you how I would do this. Okay. Number 1, I'm going to add a equalizer. I'm going to always equalize my voice first, and then I'm going to compress it. So now what you're hearing right now is my voice. Completely raw, whatever the case. And right now we have that exactly what I said when you were in a car radio, highs, mids, and lows. And that same point actually applies itself to your microphones. There's a thing in the industry called the California Smile, and that's actually what you hear for voice, which is where you kind of boost the mids, boost the lows, you drop the mids, and then boost the highs so you can get more presence in the voice. And I'll show you that right now. So I'm actually going to take the highs and we're going to boost 3, mids we're going to drop 3, and the lows we're going to boost about 3. Now, I'm not listening to the current audio as to what we have, so please go ahead and comment to what you think this is. Do you think that this adjustment made my voice better or worse? Here, I'll do a sound test beforehand. This is a sound test of my voice after applying a 3 dB curve to my voice. This is the sound of my voice without that 3 dB curve on my voice. And you go ahead and tell me which one sounds better, without and with the EQ. And this is where you'll kind of be able to say, which one do I like? Now, this doesn't give you kind of a graphic equalizer, okay? This doesn't really make a difference. But what you do need to know is that you can kind of gauge, I kind of want some more high sounds, or my lows are a little too much. This would be your best way to do it. The filter order that you apply here is what's called your signal chain, and it matters. So what I'll do is this. What you can see right here is your signal chain goes in this direction. This would be your source, and then everything below that is going to be your signal chain, okay? Your source is the microphone coming from you. By the way, I'm drawing with a pencil on this app, so sorry if I wrote source and it looks stupid. But you get the point, right? Anyway, so the signal chain really makes sense. So right now I have from the source, I have an equalizer. We're going to add a couple more things in a minute. We'll talk about why. But if you're doing a really simple EQ, this is how I would do it. EQ first. Next, I would go and add a compressor. So what we're going to do is not the upward compressor. We're going to add a regular compressor. And this gives you some options here. It says ratio, threshold, attack, and release. I'm going to turn off the compressor right now so you can hear what it sounds like just with the EQ. Now, for the natural human voice, every industry professional, let me rephrase that, most industry professionals will tell you that the audio from a voice sounds really nice when it's around a 4-to-1 ratio. So it automatically pops in as a 10-to-1 ratio, which is fine, but just know that a 4-to-1 is what plays itself really well to the voice, okay? For threshold, this is the number that you're going to move around, okay? If you're speaking a lot softer more often, you're going to lower this threshold because everything works in negatives from sound. You're going to lower this down to where your kind of normal speaking volume is. So right now, I'm around like -7, -8, -9, -10, but I want to take everything from below that and compress it upwards, right? So that's what we're going to kind of do. So I'm going to leave this at 18 and we're just going to kind of see what it does. Now, there's a couple other things you can see down here. Attack, release, and output gain. Your output gain is what's called makeup gain. I don't know why they didn't call it that, but it's really makeup gain. Your makeup gain here is specifically for when you compress your sound, you've actually removed some of your high end. Okay, you've actually hurt some of that high end. So you might actually lose some volume. So what you do is something called makeup gain. So you boost that back up to the listenable level so that it's be able to use for broadcast. So when I turn this compressor on, you can see that actually I watched it. I dropped just a couple of dB. I'm actually just going to add 1 dB back, maybe 2 dB, and that should actually have compressed my voice to keep things consistent. Now, here's what we're going to do. Here's my voice without any of the adjustments I've made, without an equalizer and without a compressor. And here is my voice with the compressor the equalizer that I added that has a 3 dB curve swing on it. And then here's my voice with the compressor that I added, which also will impact your voice slightly. Just know that it might impact your EQ, and you might have to go back and adjust that slightly. But a compressor is something I would do post your equalizer, not before. Depending on who you talk to, it'll say the other way. This is just how I like to do it. All right, so guys who are in chat, if you're here watching, let me know. What do you think? Did this make a big difference? It might not have been a large difference, but it was probably a difference. Let me know what you think. Next up, we're going to talk about a limiter and put one on here. A limiter is really easy. This is like a speed limit sign, but you can't skip it and like go another speed limit. You can't outspeed the speed limit. You can set this at -6 dB, and what will happen inside this program, or really any program you use a limiter depending on how you have it set up, this is the highest your audio will go in volume, and then it will stop it right there. And then that's basically it. A limiter is just kind of like a last fail-safe of I don't want to clip. Okay, a lot of my limiters I will set around the -3 to -5 range, because sometimes you want that, I got really loud and you want that to pop through. But also you need to know this, it shouldn't be like your end-all be-all for your sound. If I take this limiter and I put it at -6 and I cranked the gain on my microphone, you'll actually still hear that distortion sound. It just won't peak the microphone. You'll just have distortion, which is what you would normally hear on like a guitar and rock music. That's that distorted, crackly sound. You'll still get the crackly sound from your microphone, which is why you need to make sure the gain for your microphone lands in the correct place. But your threshold's kind of like your last end piece to make sure you don't clip. This is specifically used a lot in broadcast because you don't want to peak over in your microphone. Some people will put on a limiter and put it as low as like -0.1, just because they want to go all the vocal range that they possibly can, or all of the sound range they possibly can, but they don't want to hit 0, because the moment you hit 0, that's peaking. So these are your big 3 that I would work on: your equalizer, your compressor, and limiter. Your other ones are going to be your voice adjustments and kind of your saving grace. These are the things you use to kind of fix your microphone situation. For example, right now, I don't have a noise suppressor on. That's what fixes sound. This is noise restoration. I don't have a noise gate, which kind of cuts audio off. That's what saves sound. I don't have any of those other things. Right now, this is my raw microphone in my room. My son's still singing over on the couch, and I've got a TV on over in the background, even though it's lower volume. It's not a hugely treated room, but I've tried to cover the walls with stuff so that it does bounce. Now, the next thing would be, hey, I have a bunch of room sound in my room. I want to get rid of these sounds as much as I can. Those were keyboard sounds, right? I want to get rid of my keyboard sounds. Well, then what you need to do is actually add some adjustments. And most of your adjustments are going to be made prior to these three. Let's do some noise restoration. So we're going to hit plus, and the first thing we're going to do is actually add a noise gate. A noise gate is, again, what I want all sound from above this point to come through. All sound from below this point, I don't want to come through. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to put it at the bottom of the audio list. And now what we talked about earlier is this line matters. Whatever order you do here matters. So the last thing we want is the limiter, and we want the first thing to do is the noise gate. So this order top to bottom matters, just like sources inside OBS or anything like that. It stacks on like paper. It's the exact same thing, okay? So just know that this order matters. This is called the signal chain. All right, so looking here, we have the noise gate. And if we click it, you see the close threshold and the open threshold, and they're 6 dB apart. The stock setting here is not bad. I'm gonna be completely silent for a second, and I'm gonna let you hear what it sounds like without anything. Absolutely no audio. It cut out everything. Now I'm going to turn off the noise gate, and I'm gonna be completely silent. What you might not be able to see, I'm looking at, well, you can probably see the voice or the actual waveform at the bottom. You can see that if I be quiet again, watch. You can see when my son said something, the audio jumped up, right? And what that means is that it's actually picking up that sound. So when I turn on the noise gate, everything below 30 dB, it's completely gone, okay? Completely gone. So that's what's really nice, and you can adjust these based upon what you need, and everything matters. Like, for example, I would unplug your keyboard. I'm smacking away on my keyboard and it's not being picked up by the threshold. But if I turn off the gate, you probably could hear me smashing on the keyboard at that point, right? So a noise gate is really good for that. The problem with a noise gate is it's an on-off switch. There's no processing. It's just if it reaches this point, boom, it goes. When it comes to the gate, it's just an on-off. So there are other options, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually turn off the noise gate and we're gonna look at the other option. We're gonna look at a noise suppressor. And once again, when we add a filter, it's going to put it at the bottom of the list. I wanna put this above, and I don't want it to be above the noise gate. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But we're gonna put the noise suppressor here. And you have in this program 2 options, and in most broadcast programs you have the exact same. You have speaks, and then you have RN noise. You have speaks here, and then you have more RN noise here. So when it comes to speaks, this is the low CPU usage, and you actually get to choose at what point do you suppress. This is kind of like a gate, but not like a gate. It just kind of puts a drastic curve on the audio. So it gets a little bit more usage than a noise gate. However, I personally don't like this because I think it adds a little bit of like hiss to your voice. So when it comes to speaks, I would only use this if you have a lower end system. We're talking about Office PC from 10 years ago. You have a Celeron chip from the last 10 years and you're trying to stream with it. The speaks one is the one I would use, not the next one, because it does use more CPU, but it doesn't use that much CPU usage. Let me just say that. Maybe I have a 14700K, it uses 1%. Okay, so I'm going to click RN noise, and what you're going to see right now is it has no adjustments here. All it's doing is it's taking my sound and focusing on my audio only. And as this might sound great, if you have multiple people in a room, like a buddy of mine who plays with his wife in the same room, this method doesn't actually work for him because it picks up on the other voice and still amplifies both. So this is not necessarily all the best choice for you to be able to use. It can be, but it's not always the best choice. But for right now, for what's in here, this works really well. And as you can see, if I stop talking, it's a very, very small amount of sound coming through, okay? But it's still going to be focusing on my voice. Now, anytime you use a sound suppressor, you're going to have some quality loss. It's just natural. It's going to happen. So the amount of times that you add any kind of extra effects that are color correcting or noise correcting, you're going to lose some quality. That's why I say this should be like the last things you add, not the first things you add. So both of these together, the noise gate and the suppression, is probably like your best scenario. You're cutting out, you're guaranteeing that you're cutting out anything like keyboards, right? But you're also going to cut out anything that might happen above that by using the noise suppressor. Just know that you're also going to be cutting out on some of your audio quality at that time. Now, the other part of that is, what about like RTX, like broadcast, NVIDIA broadcast with this AI software? I love it. I've used it before. I've made a video on it. I think I made a couple videos on RTX broadcast, and it's using its features, right? The only issue I have with RTX broadcast is unless you have a good GPU, and I'm talking better than like an RTX 2060 Super 3060, right? The lower end RTX cards. If you have I have a 4080, I could use it and only see maybe about 4%, 5% usage. But those cards, you're seeing 10, 15% usage just for AI to take care of your audio. Is it great? Sure. But if you're a gamer who has to actively use your card, or you're a video editor or anything kind of creative that you do on stream and you have to use your GPU, you're going to see issues, because not only are you going to have dropped frame rates, you might actually have stutters in your program or stutters in your audio because it can't work that well. Okay, so that's kind of those things that you really need to pay attention to. So make sure you kind of pay attention to, if you're going to use that, what's your usability, is it for your use case, etc. That's basically everything here from a gate and suppression. But we also have one other option, which is VST plugins. All right, so here we are, we're back in and we're looking at plugins. We're going to look at VST plugins, and we're going to look at the ones that I have installed, which is REA Comp, Control MIDI, Standalone, EQ Standalone, Gate, JS, Stream one. You can actually click this and actually send your audio. These are the ones you would look at, and you can send like specific bit rates, things like that. To get these guys, you're going to go to a browser. You can type in Reaper plugins, and it will pop up. It's just REA plugs. And once you get here to this website, you'll see right here in the middle, hopefully my camera's not covering it, download REA plugs. You can get it for a 64-bit system or 32. Most computers today are 64. If you have a 32, you probably know you have 32. But anyway, here's some of them that you have. Here's the compressor. This is the exact same thing we mentioned earlier from the internal compressor, but with a lot more control. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please, if you again, tag me on socials if there's anything you want me to be able to cover, anything that you find in the future that's really cool, that you're like, hey, you should do this, please tag me. I've got so much, not only product review, but I got so many things to cover with console streams coming up. Like the whole month of January and February are going to be console streams. Lightstream just announced full multi-streaming, by the way, simulcasting through Lightstream on your console, no PC required. You can now go live on Kick, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, everything. Guys, thank you so much. Y'all have a great night, great day, and deuces all. Thanks for